Hi there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is. As always, happy whatever day it is you're watching this. What you're watching is called What's Left. I'm your host. My name's Larry Erickson, and for the next half hour or so, I'm going to be talking about some things that I hope you'll find interesting enough to stay with us. If you have any reactions to the show, you can send it to me directly if you'd like. This is my personal email here, whoviating@aol.com. And if you'd rather, though, you can go to my website. It's called Lotus Surviving a Dark Time, and the URL will be here a couple of times during the show. You can get the email address from there if you missed it, or you can get the leave a comment there if you'd rather do it that way. If you do send me email, as always, just two things. One, include something in the subject line that makes it clear it's about the show, it's not spam. And two, be a little patient about getting an answer. So with that, let's get to it. I always like to start with some good news where I can, and I've got a couple of bits of good news to get us off into a good start this week. The first is that a recent survey by the Pew Research Center included one notable result. For the first time ever, a majority, 54% of Republicans and Republican leaners said that society should accept homosexuality. By contrast, only 35% of those same people felt that way just 10 years ago. Democrats and Democratic leaners, not too surprisingly, were more emphatic. 83% said society should accept homosexuality. Next up, this is sort of related to that because it comes under the same broad heading of LGBTQ rights. Stiles Suchlag is a 17-year-old Maine boy who has been attending, or had been attending, Tri-City Christian Academy in Somersworth, New Hampshire. That all changed when he came out as transgender in 2015. The school knew of his gender change, but he wanted to be clear that he wanted to be addressed now as Stiles, not as Elijah, which I hope I'm pronouncing correctly. I'm taking this as this is a female version of Elijah, the biblical prophet. So I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He wanted to be called Stiles, not Elijah. So he spoke to a counselor at this Christian school in August who gave him an ultimatum. He had to confess his sins, renounce that he was male, stop taking testosterone treatments, go to Christian counseling, or find a new school. So this year, he found a new school, a public one, Noble High School in North Berwick, Maine. When an email began circulating asking for nominees for the position of this year's homecoming king, as a joke, he asked for his name to be put in. And you know what's coming. Not only was he nominated on October 6th, he won. Now, this is a small thing. It's a very small thing, in fact, but nonetheless, it's one of those additional little signs of progress, one of those little signs of acceptance of people, and that, as always, is good news. All right, next up, another bit of good news. The 2017 Nobel Peace Prize has gone to the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, group known as ICAN. It's a coalition of grassroots, non-governmental organizations in some 100 countries. Now, the award going to a relatively little-known peace group was something of a surprise, which has led some to suspect that the award was intended as a kick in the shins to Donald the Rump, not only for his bellicosity over North Korea, but also for his apparent intention to try to weasel out of the Iran nuclear deal. The Nobel Committee denied that, saying the award was actually intended to call on nuclear states that have nuclear weapons now, to fulfill their earlier pledges to negotiate to get rid of them. Either way, the renewed attention to the threat of war this brings, a threat which has never actually gone away, but which now seems to be increasing, bringing attention to that threat is welcome, and in that way, it's good news. All right, last up, remember Alex Wubbels? She's the nurse who in July was arrested and physically dragged out of a hospital by a Salt Lake City cop named Jeff Payne after she entirely properly refused to allow him to draw blood from an unconscious patient without a warrant. Video of her arrest went viral and she was quickly released without charges. The good news here is that on October 11th, Jeff Payne was fired. And to top it off, his supervisor, who told him to go ahead and arrest Wubbles, was demoted from lieutenant to ordinary officer. Now, Wubbles did have three advantages here. One, the event was recorded, which all too often doesn't seem to do any good at all. But in this case, if there hadn't been a recording, nothing would have happened. Second, she's a nurse. And third, she's white. Now, none of that protected her from the mistreatment, but together they did mean that, as too rarely happens, there were actually consequences for being a bad cop. And that, again, is good news. Unfortunately, this week, we also have some not good news. Now, you remember, I surely hope, the activism and protest around the Dakota Access pipeline, a 1,200-mile oil pipeline that was to be part of a system to get tar sands oil from Canada across the Midwest and ultimately to the Gulf Coast. Still, let me give you a bit of history to get you up to date. The planned route of the pipeline, being built by a corporation called Energy Transfer Partners, crossed the Missouri River just upstream from the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation, threatening land sacred to the tribe as well as threatening its source of drinking water. The outpouring of support that led to mass protests at the site were undoubtedly part of what moved the Obama administration to deny the final permits to cross the river and to promise a full environmental review that considered the tribe's treaty rights as well as alternative routes. And of course, almost immediately on taking office, the rump said, forget that, here are the permits. The tribe filed a lawsuit to challenge this decision, but construction went ahead and in fact was completed while the case was still pending. In fact, in June, though, just weeks after the pipeline operations had begun, in this case, the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia ruled that the Army Corps of Engineers had not complied with environmental review laws before issuing the permits to cross the river. The court ordered the court to do a new analysis of critical issues that had not properly addressed. Okay, here's where the not good news comes in. The court also had ordered a separate briefing to assess whether the pipeline should be shut down while this so-called remand process goes on. On October 11th, the District Court for the District of Columbia ruled that the pipeline can keep operating. It rejected the claim that shutting down the pipeline would cause substantial economic harm to the company, noting that Energy Transfer Partners had gotten itself into that situation by operating the pipeline while the case was still being litigated. However, the court also ruled that because it is possible that the Corps can justify its decision when this remand is completed, it can justify its decision to not do a full environmental review, that therefore the gunk can keep flowing. The tribe had also asked, by the way, for additional measures to reduce the risk of oil spills. That matter is still before the court. For now, the tribe intends to focus on the remand process, and it has a team of experts in helping it provide input. Now, the Army Corps of Engineers has stated that this remand process should be completed by April of 2018, and the court admonished the Corps to not treat this process as a bureaucratic formality, but to give serious consideration to the errors identified by the court. So the fight goes on, but for right now, the news is not good. All right, next up, one of our regular features. This is the outrage of the week. And this week, what we're going to talk about revolves around the NFL players who are taking a knee during the national anthem, or some of them are not coming out into the field until after the anthem is played, or otherwise engaging in some quiet protest. Now, this, of course, started with Colin Kaepernick, who engaged in what was just supposed to be a quiet personal protest, initially sitting on the bench and then taking a knee because he said he could not stand with his hand over his heart in light of the repeated killings of young black men by police. The protest caught on. It's spread. We've seen whole teams kneel. Occasionally, we've actually seen NFL teams kneel with their owners. But now what we're seeing is a lot of pushback. Pushback from government officials and those in the media who duly parrot the claptrap, saying that this is disrespectful. Shouldn't do this. It's disrespectful to the flag. It's disrespectful to the national anthem. It's even insulting. But the protests are not about the anthem. They're not about the flag. They are about police brutality. They are about police murders of unarmed young black men. They are about the bigotry of automatically seeing black men as thugs, as menacing, as dangerous. They are about racism as expressed through the behavior of our police forces. They are not about the national anthem. Even less are they about the flag. That's just a point of focus. That's all that is. It's a point of focus, the symbol around which the protests are organized. It's not the target. Saying this protest, saying taking a knee, is protesting the anthem or protesting the flag. It's like saying if you had a march in Washington, D.C., you're protesting Pennsylvania Avenue. It's like saying if you had a protest at the White House that you're not protesting a law or a condition or some policies of the current administration. No, you're protesting the existence of that building. And in fact, you are philosophically protesting the very idea of the presidency. You are attacking our very constitutional government. Saying this is about the flag or about the anthem is like saying that Martin Luther King, when he made his famous I Have a Dream speech in Washington, D.C. in August of 1963, that he was protesting the Lincoln Memorial. Because remember, he turned his back on the statue of Abraham Lincoln in order to make that speech. Trying to make this about the flag, trying to make this about the national anthem, is an attempt to change the subject being undertaken by people who don't want to address the subject. They want to avoid the subject. They want to demonize the protest by demonizing the protesters. They are lying to you. They are lying to you to avoid facing their own bigotry and the bigotry they support through their official duties and their media maunderings. And they are lying to you to enable you, to free you, to continue to not consider your own bigotry. This has nothing to do with the flag, nothing to do with and you know the thing, the part of this that really, really gets me, that really, really irritates me? The claim that by protesting the anthem, you are denigrating, you are insulting, you are disrespecting our soldiers. Soldiers? That the flag is equivalent to soldiers? The flag is... That is positively un-American. It is. When you connect the flag to one particular group of people and say that is to who the flag relates, that is un-American. And it's what saying that the soldiers, saying that the military is America is un-American. The military, yet part of America, but it does not define America. You don't see this? You don't see the problem here? Try changing that description of insulting to soldiers to any other group, okay? It's insulting to teachers, disrespecting the anthem, and that's insulting to teachers. After all, we call teachers the guardians of our future. It's insulting to hardworking American union members. It's insulting to peace activists who raise the value of free speech and freedom of action and honor our dissenting traditions throughout our history. It's insulting to civil rights lawyers. And if you still don't get this, suppose instead of saying this was insulting to soldiers, suppose we just substituted white people. These NFL players, mostly black NFL players, kneeling in protest they are denigrating white people. Now, does that sound appropriate to you? Because if it doesn't, why is it not okay to single out white people as being attached to the flag, but it is okay to single out soldiers? Why is it okay to attach one particular group of people to that flag as if it was not embracing everybody else? And why the military? Why soldiers? What does that say about us as a people, that they are the ones who get to be attached to the flag? Now, actually, let me stop there, because I'm getting myself off into a different topic, into the militarism that flows through our national veins. So I'm going to leave that aside for now. I want to get back to the original topic. Just going to say, saying that protesting the anthem is insulting to soldiers is flatly un-American, because the military does not define the country. Anyway, I want to get back to the actual protest, what the actual protest is about, because on that, the facts speak for themselves. First off, know that there is no definitive data on the number of people killed by police, and the federal government does an absolutely terrible job of keeping track. So there's some play in the numbers, but the trends that they mark are unmistakable. For one thing, blacks are far more likely to be killed by cops than whites are. In fact, as compared to their percentage of the population, blacks are 5.5 times more likely to be killed by cops than whites are. Black males aged 15 to 34 are 9 times more likely than other Americans to be killed by cops. Black males aged 15 to 19 are 21 times more likely to be killed by a cop than white males of the same age. And that racial difference persists among unarmed victims. If you count all racial minorities together, not just blacks, but all racial minorities, an unarmed minority person is nearly 3 times as likely to be killed by a cop as an unarmed white person. When you consider just African Americans, the figure is 5 times higher. And no, this has nothing to do with crime rate, nothing to do with, well, they commit more crimes and the rest of that nonsense. Nothing to do with the crime rate. Multiple studies have found no correlation between police shootings and the local crime rate. And no, it's not just because police are in such terrible danger. Again, there's some play in the numbers. But according to the group mappingpoliceviolence.org, as of October 12th, 931 people had been killed this year by police in the U.S. According to killedbypolice.net, the figure at that same date was 941. According to the Washington Post, as of using a more, if you will, conservative methodology, as of October 8th, the number was 770 non-cops killed by cops. And they noted that's a higher number than at the same point in 2016. On the other hand, the Officer Down Memorial page, which is devoted to memorializing cops who were killed in the line of duty, says that as of October 9th, 37 police in this country had been killed by gunfire in 2017. And they noted that is a drop of 16% from the same date in 2016. Cops shot and killed by non-cops, down. Non-cops killed by cops, up. Here's a comparison. Here's the way to think about this. In 2016, 266 of the 1,093 people killed by cops were black. That's 24.4%. If the proportion in 2017 is the same, has remained the same so far this year, then using the lowest figure of people killed by police, that from the Washington Post, it means 188 blacks have been killed so far this year by cops. Which means that so far this year, to date, cops have killed 5 times as many blacks as the total number of cops who have been killed by everyone. Blacks, whites, Hispanics, everybody. There comes a point when we are at, or in fact, by any sense of logic should be well beyond, a point whereby all that's rational, where despite the desperate fantasies of those such as the recent invention by the FBI Terrorism Task Force of a new threat of black identity extremism, a threat to police concocted wholly out of the deaths of 8 cops in 6 incidents over 3 years, Despite such desperate fantasies, there comes a point where no honest person, no one with basic human decency and cognitive facilities that can outmatch a rabbit, there comes a point where you simply cannot deny the truth related in these numbers. You simply cannot chalk these numbers up to anything other than racism. And the fact that there are voices, powerful voices in government and the media that would do and are doing exactly that would and do deny that reality, that would and do insistently, persistently lie to you about those trying to raise awareness of that fact, that shows that those voices in government, in the media, lack that honesty, lack that basic decency, and that is the deepest sort of outrage, and I need a break. And we are back. Something new around here, something I'm going to be doing now. I've been meaning for some time to take a bit more of an internationalist view on the show here. Because too often we, I don't mean just we here, I mean the whole range of us, all of the political shows and podcasts and blogs and whatever. We tend to focus too much on the U.S., almost exclusively, in fact, on domestic issues, and we tend to address the rest of the world only to the degree and only when it directly affects us. We act like we are alone on the earth. But of course, we're not. We're not alone on the earth. So I've decided on a new weekly feature called, appropriately enough, We Are Not Alone. Each week, the first thing back from break, we are going to spend a couple of minutes. It may be very brief, it may be a few minutes, several minutes, but we're going to spend a little time addressing some event or events, maybe a single event, maybe several events. We're going to be talking about little things beyond our borders, things about the fact that there is a world beyond us. This week, the thing I'm going to be talking about is Burma. Rakhine Province in southwest Burma, you may well have heard about this, has been the site of ethnic cleansing directed at the Rohingya, a stateless Muslim people. The UN Human Rights Office has blamed the Myanmar military for brutally driving over 500,000 Rohingya from northern Rakhine state into Bangladesh in recent weeks, torching homes, crops, and villages to prevent those who are fleeing from returning. There are survivor accounts of mass killings and rapes as part of that ethnic cleansing. The Rohingya are not classified as an indigenous minority in Myanmar, and so are denied citizenship under a law that links nationality to ethnicity. They're not just not citizens, they are legally barred from becoming citizens. And when I say stateless, you understand what that means, is that they are not recognized as citizens of any state in the world. For example, compare, for example, the Kurds. Now, the Kurds, there's no Kurdistan, but the Kurds in Turkey are regarded as citizens of Turkey. The Kurds in Iraq are citizens of Iraq, the Kurds in Iran, and so on. The Rohingya don't have that. They have no nation where they say, we are citizens here. That's what it means to be stateless. By the way, something else that people raise, I'll mention it here. Burma versus Myanmar. Okay, Myanmar is the formal legal name of the country, but that name was imposed by the military junta that seized power some years ago. Burma is the traditional name, and it is the name that the people, the common people, still use. Anyway, despite the Rohingya are regarded as not part of Burma, as not residents of Burma, even though that they've lived there for generations and generations. They are still regarded as illegal immigrants from Bangladesh. They face restrictions and discrimination. They are derided by much of the wider, largely Buddhist population of Burma, a population which has actually experienced a surge in Buddhist nationalism recently. Now, The military onslaught in Rakhine was triggered by a small-scale attack on clearly military targets back in August, this was, by the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, which is demanding full citizenship rights and recognition of Rohingyas as an indigenous community. Even before the government offensive here, the small, lightly armed army was only capable of hit-and-run raids, which is why a more accurate description would be to say not that the August raid triggered the Army's response, but it was used to justify the Army's response. Anyway, a related thing I want to talk about is that what was billed in the first part of a major push for improved relations among followers of different faiths in Burma, mass interfaith rallies were held in several places on October 10th, attended by Buddhist, Muslim, Hindu, and Christian leaders calling for peace and understanding. Which sounds good, hopes for peace and reconciliation, including in Rakhine, except for the fact that this was all organized by the National League for Democracy, which is the ruling political party in the country. In other words, these were government-sponsored, government-organized rallies intended to push back against the international condemnation of the government by issuing gooey appeals for unity, and in some cases directly defending the government or attacking its critics as lacking understanding. These rallies existed for one purpose: to promote a message that will be equivalent to one here in the U.S. that responds to issues of racism by solemnly intoning the greeting card sentimentality of all lives matter. The insistence there, as it would be here, is that the one thing you can't do is hold anyone responsible. Well, frankly, that's not good enough. The government, and particularly the army, that despite the veneer of democracy is still essentially in charge, they are responsible and they should be held accountable. Now, there is some talk, it's vague, but there is talk along these lines. Apparently, the European Union and the United States are supposedly considering targeted sanctions aimed specifically at the top generals of the Myanmar military. These are sanctions, in fact, that were not even on the table just a month ago. There was also talk of increased aid to Rakhine, which would be frankly hard to do because the government of Myanmar will not allow international observers or aid workers into the area. All right, that's it for this week. I'm going to wrap up there. Again, we're going to be doing something like this every week, first thing back from break. But now I'm just going to say to you that, as I do every week, you just have the best week you possibly can. We will see you next week. And for now, as always, peace.